Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Ziggy's World. Today I've got Craig. Craig, welcome to the show. How are you, mate?
How are you?
I'm good. We'll crack on and get into the discussion because it's going to be got a lot to talk about.
Okay.
First of all, I'm going to talk about your freedom of information. That's got a hell of a lot of attention and it's blown up to quite a big story now. How did that get a start and how did you get into that, finding out about this?
Well, it went back to a press release that was put out with the second tranche of money that went to UNRWA, and that would have been end October, beginning of November. And it wasn't something it said that caught my attention. It was something it didn't say. And on the same press release, the Scottish Government had donated the initial £500,000 to UNRWA, and they also donated £250,000 from memory to Libya because there was a flood disaster there. And on the Libyan story, it gave you 3 bits of information. It told you the amount, where it was going, and where it came from, i.e. the fund within the Scottish Government. But interestingly enough, the UNRWA press release only spoke about 2 facts, and that was the amount and where it was going. It completely missed out telling us where the money had came from. So I thought that was quite peculiar, and my senses were drawn to that. And then about 10 days, 2 weeks later, there was a second announcement with the second lot of money, which was £250,000 this time to UNRWA. The press release came out, and again, it only told you where it came, where it was going and how much. It again failed to tell you which pot it came from. And then I started looking at other press releases anytime the Scottish Government had gave any humanitarian aim, and all the ones I could see had a source of funds. The two to Gaza had no source of funds. So that's where my initial interest developed. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound right. So that's what gave me the spur to go for an FOI, and the first and only FOI I've ever done in my life, I hasten to add.
So they announced it on the 2nd of November.
Yeah, that was the second one, yeah.
This extra 250,000.
That's right.
And on the 3rd of November, Humza met with representatives of the UNRWA. Is that correct?
The chronological order might be slightly out. The agreement was made before the 1st of November, and then he met them. And I think that the actual press release might have come out the same day as the meeting, but the decision was made, which I could see through the FOI just previous to the meeting. He actually, in the FOI release that I got, one of the most damning emails from Humza was to state, look, we're just going to give the money to UNRWA because I'm meeting them in a couple of days' time. And then the decision was reversed because it was originally the money was to go to UNICEF. That's what the Department of External Affairs had suggested and recommended. There was a ministerial decision made around about the 26th to the 28th. Again, it's quite difficult because of the amount of retractions on the FOI.
Did go to the cabinet and ask for it?
It states that it was decided by a minister. It doesn't say who or when, but you work out the chronological order. It must have been sometime round about the 28th of October.
So the minister could basically be Humza himself?
It could possibly be, or it could be, I can't remember her name now, her name's just through my mind, but on the first press release, that was another strange thing. It stated this money and was given by the minister who basically should give money to any foreign company. It's terrible, I can't remember. McKelvey. She's basically a foreign minister, although it's a slightly different title she's got. But the second one just said Humza Yousaf donates this 250,000, which I thought was peculiar as well. So I'd actually asked Miss McKelvey via Twitter about a week ago. I said, look, I hope you're well. And something is, strange that in the first announcement that came from you, which seems right, but the second announcement, you've obviously stepped back from making that announcement. You let Humza do it. Was there any particular reason for that? Unfortunately, she failed to respond to me, and in fact blocked me on Twitter. So
that's the usual course.
Yeah, there might be a reason why, but I am unable to
because
divulge why, because I don't know.
I'm just going through what I followed you, and I've listened to your podcasts, and I found this story really interesting because on a number of issues. One, did he go through cabinet to get this changed, this second lot of money changed? Did he break ministerial code by doing this, by announcing this? Because he was told not to do it, wasn't he?
Well, not so much he was told not to do it. It was recommended. It was recommended that the money should be given to UNICEF. And again, it's heavily retracted. There was 3 proposals. There was 3 options available to Scottish Government for this money. And I need to clarify at this point, I've never once said the money should not have went to Gaza. Right? I think, on a humanitarian issue in the world, and, if some people disagree that we should be given any humanitarian aid. However, there's £14 million a year made available to the Scottish Government to do so. So, that's not for us. We can't override that. But it's the way that the decision was made. It's overturned a ministerial decision. It's went against the advice that was given by DEXA. And they basically said, out of the 3 options, we recommend you do give it to UNICEF. Because Humza had approached the ministers to say, can we give more money? And in one of the emails, it says that he's looking to give more money because there's a shortage of water in Gaza. Now, the UNICEF offer, the option, was specifically for what they call a WASH programme, which is supplying fresh water or filters or anything that can give fresh water in an area that's got a shortage of fresh water. So that's probably some way the reason why DEXA plus the ministers had wanted to give it to UNICEF, because it filled the criteria of Humza's initial request for extra money to go to Gaza. And, it made sense, give it to UNICEF. And I thought it was also bizarre, all through the discussions about the UNICEF money, it was to be a figure between 100 and 200,000. In one of the emails where it says there was a decision made, it clarifies that it was 200,000. But the UNRWA money was it was 25% more, because it was 250. And instead of being for a specific reason, and the actual reason that Humza asked for the money in the first place, which was for water, that money was given to UNRWA on an unrestricted basis. And I just find this peculiar. And I don't think anybody leading any Western, non-third world, non-communist, non-dictatorship should be unable to answer questions like this. Why did you give it to that fund as opposed to the recommendation? Why did you do this? And he just doesn't want to answer. He just wants to shout, that's Islamophobic.
When the issue that I see is, I don't think there would be an issue if there wasn't such a big conflict of interest with his relatives at that time.
That's how the story developed. I get contacted via Twitter by Camilla Turner from The Telegraph, and she just asked me, she said, look, I've been sent this video, I've had a look at it, I'm really interested in the story, can we talk? I gave her my phone number, we had a discussion, I talked her through the information I had and the story in a bit more detail. She then done a great job, because she took it further. Somehow, how she done it, I don't know, but she found out that the Met Police had been informed about this, and a complaint had been made to their anti-terror group. She got great quotes from two Tory MPs and a Lib Dem. For some bizarre reason, there was no Labour MP willing to comment, or she maybe didn't ask them, I don't know, but there certainly wasn't one in the story. Now, the way the story got driven was this conflict of interest. That's what a lot of people picked up on. That's what Stephen Kerr, the Tory MSP, took to Parliament, and that was what his quotes were in the article. And that seems to have been what drove the story forward then. But since then, I've released other information about the source of funds and how it's been a misuse of funds, because where the money came from, you just simply can't give money to Gaza or UNRWA. And I actually think that's a bigger deal, because conflict interest is subject to and open to debate. Okay. However, when you take money out of a fund that you shouldn't be taking money out of, that's a far clearer black and white yes or no on that. And I think that's the biggest.
One of the issues I see, Craig, is if he's done this off his own back and made this decision, he has, and from what I can see, he has broken ministerial code, because all those decisions about funding, about where money goes to, about all sorts of these kind of things, that has to be done at cabinet level and agreed by the whole of the cabinet. And if he hasn't got cabinet permission to do this, that's a serious ministerial, breaking of the ministerial code.
I've obviously looked into this quite a lot, and I've looked into the funding available from the IDF fund, and I cannot categorically say that's true. What I think, because it can be done at a ministerial level, I'm not 100% convinced it has to go to cabinet. Okay, but what I do share Stephen Kerr's opinion is when he says there's a conflict of interest, because we're talking about an area that's in conflict at that particular moment, and he has family on holiday in that area. Now, I've been member of boards where that board has had to make a decision, and that decision actually involved me. So what I'd done at that point was took the moral and probably correct legal decision then, and said to the other committee board members, I'm not going to partake in the vote on this subject because it's about me. I'll stay in the room. If any of you want me to give you any input, please ask me. If you get to the vote and any of you are uncomfortable at me being in the room and you vote on the subject, let me know and I'll leave the room. Now, that was me dealing with a semi-sensible sized limited company, right? Not running a government. And I had, the morals about myself to do that. He decided not to do that. He's maybe not even considered there's a conflict of interest, but I would find that hard to believe when the news at the time was all about your in-laws being in Gaza. You couldn't forget that if you're not Humza.
He's got enough spads and he's got enough people around him to inform him about this and about the conflict, that he must have known there was a conflict.
Yeah. But it's still not a grey area. I would say it's almost black and white, right? But see this misuse of funds, to me, that's clear cut.
Yeah.
There is no debate open to that. There it is in black and white. I've went through it in a few videos and spoken detail about how that money could not be taken out of that fund to be given to Gaza or UNRWA. And the only fund that we have available to us in the Scottish Government that would have fit the criteria, there wasn't enough left in it.
So,
because there was an HEF fund, which is a humanitarian and environmental fund, which is exactly for humanitarian and environmental disasters around the world. That's where the Libyan money came from, because it ticks the box, it fulfills the criteria. Yeah. But there wasn't enough money in that. So they just took out the IDF pot. They shouldn't have. And that's not open for debate. That's factual.
What's your opinion? Because the way my mind works and the way I look at things, I go back and I go back to what Humza's been, many statements he's made on this subject. And when the UK government banned, and so did a lot of the EU banned this organisation, America banned funding for them, the UK banned funding for them. Humza came on TV and stated, I'm not going to ban this group. This group needs the money. We're going to keep giving money. Do you think this was also I'm showing my power here I'm going to show that I run a government rather than the UK, separate to the UK, and I'm going to give this extra money as well. I'm going to give this extra money to show that I am the leader. Do you think that was part of it as well?
I think it could be. There's a possibility there. But if I hadn't seen him on TV spouting that. I had read his tweet spouting that. And I thought it was bizarre because at that particular time, the most of the rest of the world was backing away from UNRWA. Yeah. So you didn't have to say anything, right? But by default, the UK government had already said, we're not funding you just now. We're going to put it on ice because this stuff was going about with their employees, being involved in the 7th of October attacks. So the wise money, I thought, would have been to say nothing. But Humza decided, for whatever reason, on that day, to take to Twitter and potentially, you're saying he was on TV doing it as well. I didn't see that.
I've seen him. I think it was an interview where he said it as well.
Yeah, and he actually said, just to make everybody clear, Scottish government have not decided to freeze funding UNRWA. We're just not in a position to do so just now. But whenever we're able to do it again, we will give you more.
Yeah, because there was an announcement just before he said that. I think it was an hour or two before he said that the Scottish government had decided to do the same as the UK government. And I think that was on the BBC website or something, or the BBC had tweeted about it. And that's when an hour or two later, Humza came out and said, I'm going to correct that. That's not our position. So there's a conflict of, did the Scottish government, did the ministers, the cabinet decide we'll go with the UK, and then Humza's overruled them? There's so many questions and so many.
I think it's a very dicey job to do, because Scotland does not have the power of foreign policy. No. That's a reserved matter for the UK government. So he's actually went out and took to the world stage and said the complete opposite to the UK's standpoint at the time. If you remember, about a month or two before that, David Cameron had to remind them of the protocols when the Scottish First Minister wants to meet any foreign dignitaries.
The Turkish one. Yeah.
Correct. So, this to me just flew in the face of that. But the UK, rightly or wrongly, by the way, I'm not deciding who's right and wrong here. I'm not wanting to be judge and jury. But factually, the UK government came out and said, we're suspending. So that's the UK. Yeah. That's the whole lot. Is the four country nations involved in that. But he's come out and said the total opposite. And you're like, that. Now, I tell you where my head is with it. I don't think that tweet was aimed at you. I don't think it was aimed at me. And I don't think it was even aimed at Westminster. I think that tweet was aimed at UNRWA themselves. Yeah. To say, just to let you know, guys, I still quite like you. It was so odd. And that's something, but I've got to consider who was that aimed at.
The thing, the pattern I'm seeing, and I've seen it with Sturgeon, and it came out in the COVID inquiry, is our system is through all the governments, and you can question whether the Scottish is a government or an administration. We can question that. That's another story, but it is classed as a government. They class themselves as a government, and our system is our decisions are made by cabinet, not by the First Minister, but by cabinet. Now, the pattern I'm seeing with Humza is the same as what was levelled at Sturgeon during the inquiry, that Sturgeon was making all the decisions for COVID and bypassing cabinet. Now, it looks to me, and it's not just on this occasion, not on this, but with the council tax freeze, that was not done by cabinet. That was done 10 minutes before Humza walked onto stage and gave his final speech, because they needed a good story to come out, because they were getting hammered. So they come out with the council tax freeze. It was written on the back of a paper and it was given to him, and he made the decision there and then. Now, that is a pattern that Humza's following Sturgeon, and it seems to be doing all the time. He's making all the decisions and bypassing the cabinet. And I'm wondering, has he done the same with this that he's done with all? Did the cabinet even know he was going to be given this 250,000? Do we know that?
Well, I specifically asked for all correspondence and minutes of any of the decision-making process to come to this decision. I received no minutes, no retractions of minutes. So that would suggest to me that no meetings took place, that it was all done via email. And that doesn't suggest to me that a cabinet meeting. But I must stress, I just genuinely don't know if, because a decision by the Scottish Government had already been made that this £10 million lump of money, £1 million for HEF and another £3 million for environmental, climate change, money, is already available for the Scottish Government to give to whoever, right? So I don't know if, because that's already a thing, that where the money goes to and still needs a cabinet meeting. It may be that the cabinet had decided 2 years ago that this should be a part of the Scottish Government with the 10 and the 3 and the £1 million funds available. So therefore, after that point, I'm not 100% sure. I wouldn't like to.
I would think. I would think when you're dealing with public funds, every penny is accountable.
Listen, I'm not disagreeing with you, mate. But what I don't do, I would never come to a conclusion
without the facts. Yeah,
right? Because I don't know. So I can't back up what you're suggesting that this has to be a cabinet meeting. I think it would be wise, but I don't know if that's factual or not. So I couldn't put my
what we'd need is the cabinet meeting that that must have took place in my view to change where the money goes to, because that's what should have happened in my view. Or am I?
Well, I disagree with that because I don't know. Right. I can't agree with that because I don't know factually if that's the process that you have to go through. What I'm suggesting is it may not be. Yeah. Okay. But what I'm also suggesting to you is I have no minutes of any meetings in the pack that I was given back. So that would suggest there was no cabinet meeting, but I'm not convinced or 100% sure if that's a requirement of.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and yeah, I'm with you. I agree with that. It'd be quite an interesting thing to find out, but I can't believe personally that even as the First Minister, he can make them kind of decisions on his own. It has to have
no, it does sound bizarre. And even if there was no process in place, you would imagine such a decision, that's where you would go if you were the First Minister. But what I cannot do is say, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That you have to have a cabinet meeting because I don't know that factually. So all I can tell you is,
where do you go now, Craig?
There was no
with this.
Of the story.
Where does it go now? What's the next step?
Well, if I've released what I've suggested as part 2, and that is the part of the story that I feel is actually the biggest part of the story, and that is the fact of the misuse of funds, where the source of funds is not able to be used for Gaza nor the UNRWA. So that to me is a more clear cut, not open for debate, not open to opinion. That is fact. So I believe that there's a complaint being put into the I'm trying to remember Standards Commission. There's the bigger name for it than that. Is it the Qualities and Standard Commission? Basically, the body that look after how MSPs and any government official act. And I believe there's been a complaint put into them on the misuse of funds. The other part of the story that is the possibly the breaking the Ministerial Code with his potential conflict of interest. That's already been instigated by Stephen Kerr by means of a letter to the First Minister himself. So we'll need to wait and see how that comes back before that's probably progressed or not progressed by Stephen Kerr. But there's also, as I say, a complaint, I believe, been put in to the Commission on the matter of, and separate matter of, the misuse of funds. And I believe there's been a cover-up.
Could this Could this potentially be a police matter?
I don't know, because I don't know if there's any criminality involved. That would be down, first of all, to the commission to decide. And if they felt there was criminality involved, then they would go to the police. I don't know, is the honest answer. I think there's a potential. Need to be careful what I say here. All I'll say is Met Police have had a complaint to their anti-terror group.
Yeah.
That's backed up by the article in the Telegraph that quoted that. That's obviously if that's found to be upheld, then that's a criminal offence. But I am not sure, and again I wouldn't guess, but I would imagine misuse of public funds would be criminal. But you know, I'm not a QC, I'm not a criminal lawyer. I'm just a guy.
Potentially could be, couldn't it? You know,
potentially, yeah, if you've misused and knowingly misused, public funds, then I would guess that that could be a criminal offence. But that has to be established first.
I look forward to hearing the next step and what comes of this, because I think potentially it is a huge story. I want to go on to my second part of this, and that's the hate crime bill that's coming in 1st of April. Now, I have a huge problem with this. I've had a huge problem for the last 2 years since this was first gone through Parliament a few years ago. I had a huge issue with this because I think it's a real big issue for freedom of speech, for the members of the media, for shows like this and yours and all the others that are on YouTube or any kind of podcast that does Scottish politics. There is a big issue with this. Do you see do you see an issue going forward from April onwards when you do your podcasts and you do your shows of any kind of, I've got to be careful here? Do you find that, or what's your opinion on this?
My opinion, from a personal point of view, I was served with papers back in 2015 from the Court of Session in Scotland with an act against me claiming £200,000 worth of to get sued for something apparently or allegedly that I had said on social media back in 2015. The person that sued me or tried to sue me was a director of Rangers Football Club at the time. I'm a Rangers fan who was campaigning to remove the directors of Rangers Football Club at the time. I have already been taken into police custody 4 times through campaigning and never charged once. The action against me failed to go any further than the initial letter that I got through my post. And I must admit, when you see a claim against you for £200,000, you need to change your underwear because there's a lot of zeros in that. So I've been through this before and unsuccessfully, although the claim may have ultimately been unsuccessful. It wasn't pleasant to be invited in and taken into police stations on 4 occasions through campaigning, to potentially at one point I was looking to spend a bit of time in a cell waiting to go to court over a Christmas period, and that gave me a wee bit of concern because I thought that could be a long stay, depending when they were to charge you and when they were to take you to court the following day, because the following day might be 5 days away, the way bank holidays work. So I've been through issues before, and I have a clear record. So I must have been doing it right back then. It was just people trying to make nuisance of the situation. So I've always been quite wary of what I do, what I say, and what I type, which is why I was quite adamant that I had to not agree with you on a certain point there. Because if you want to say that's fact, that's you. I just need to clarify that I don't think the same. right? So that's the way I lead my life right now. That's the way I've led my life for 10 years. So I don't think I will change, because I'm already conscious of repercussions from what you say and do online.
But this law takes it a different level, though, isn't it? This new law.
Well, yeah, but listen, see, freedom of speech. Freedom of speech has never gave anybody in this country freedom to say what they like.
No, but this new law is they can actually potentially arrest you if they believe that what you were saying, that that your thought, that there's even a thought of you potentially going into saying things that you shouldn't, you can be arrested for that.
Well, this is a mad thing, right? There's bits of this bill that just don't make sense.
No.
Right? To somebody that reads it using common sense and logic, there's bits that just think that's just stupid, right? But there's some bits that are actually very scary. Now, there's two parts to the bill. There's the part that allows the courts to add on hate as an aggravation to an existing crime. For example, assault. So just now you could be up here, particularly when Rangers and football's involved, Rangers Celtic games in particular, you can be, assault aggrieved by sectarianism, for example. So there's that part of the law that has it as a bolt on to something that they're going to charge you with anyway, right? And then there's the bit that standalone hate crime. So you don't need to punch somebody. You could say something and commit hate crime. But see the bolt on bit, this bit's bizarre. It says that if there's a single source to suggest it's hate, then that is enough evidence.
Yeah.
Now that means collaboration is no longer a thing for that particular bit of law. Now I'm not quite 100% sure if there's the same collaboration down to one source with the actual hate part of it when it's a standalone crime of hate. But it is bizarre. But where I think this will go, I think people like you and I understand that there are pitholes in this potentially for you and I as people that speak in public. So you and I, if we're not already, will be having that as a second thought before you say or type anything. But there's another half of the society who believe that this hate crime bill is just solely to get folk like you and folk like me that they see as different, right? These are the woke people that inhabit quite a lot of social media. They don't believe that this bill is applicable to them because they don't believe they are ever in any way offensive or can be possibly committing hate crimes. So they will not change. And then we'll see what happens on the 1st of April. And I'll guarantee you, well, I can't guarantee you, it's stupid, but my opinion is it'll be the exact same as we've seen with the Offensive Behaviour of Football Act up here, where we had one set of supporters from one club felt that the other teams were, because they're all bad people. So when this the Offensive Behaviour at Football came out, there was one group of fans who thought the other group were just going to get found guilty and it'd be dead funny because they'd all get arrested. But when people started getting arrested, they were in almost equal numbers, if not the other team's fans were getting arrested a bit more. And they couldn't believe it. Because they felt that they were the woke people. Yeah, and the politically correct people. I can see this being a replication of what happened with offensive behaviour at football. And offensive behaviour at football was such a ridiculous law that it's been repealed and it's no longer a law. And I spoke to coppers who were actually football intelligence, so they worked solely on football, spoke to defence lawyers, I spoke to QCs, and asked them a simple question about the offensive behaviour at football. And I said, see, before that act, and that was a bill, was passed, was anybody convicted for anything that they couldn't have been convicted on with previous laws? And the answer I got was no. So I think this might be the same. People that want to say stupid things online will still get arrested, but they can be arrested today. And anybody that's arrested after the 1st of April may still be the same as if the Football Act, that they could have been, if you wanted to arrest them, you could have arrested them anyway.
I follow Roddy Dunlop on Twitter, and I asked him about this hate law, and he came back with an expression which I've never heard. Roddy is quite, when it comes to the law, you'll know yourself, when it comes to the law, he doesn't give an opinion, he just gives what the law is. You know, he won't get involved in giving opinions on certain things. But he came back with my question with, this has the potential to be oppression in Scotland, to be oppression. Now, for a QC who is very careful in his wording on what he says, that's quite a damning and scary prospect with this law. We got Joanne Cherry saying that this law sets back women's rights and hurts women more than any other section of the community, because you misgender a person in Scotland after the 1st of April, that is a hate crime.
Potentially, yeah. And the thing is, sex right now is not protected, but it says it might have the ability to going forward. So, but right now, women do not have any protection, right? So they're not a protected group, as the Act describes them. And it has got the potential to be very oppressive. However, the whole legal system requires a lot of things to happen before anybody's committed. And that is, one, a complaint to be made, which I think there'll be a million of them.
And the police have said they will take every single one of the complaints seriously and invest. How can that happen? How is that workable?
I don't know, is the honest answer, but that's what I'm coming to. So first thing is, you need to have a complaint, and I think there'll be loads of them. The second thing is, the police have got to have enough evidence that they wish to charge you. So that's step 2. Then it goes to the prosecution service, who need to decide if they think taking this to court could give them a conviction or not. That's step 3. Then it goes into the court of law, and one of two things happen then. Either it's a low-level crime and a judge decides whether you're guilty or not, or it's a high-level crime and you have to be committed by your peers, a jury. So there's a lot of stuff has to happen. It's okay for every woke lefty in the, in social media to make complaints about any. I guarantee you, in the first month, I'll get a complaint against me.
Yeah,
right?
and I feel the same about that. That'll happen to me.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you're guilty.
No.
There's another 3 stages to go before you get to that bit. So I just think we need to suck it and see. Now, let me just get your consideration, and without getting breaking confidences. I know when the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act went live, the police who had to actually administer it weren't happy with it. The courts didn't seem to make any difference, because if you were fighting at the football, you were fighting at the football. You got in charge, the day before it came out and the day after. It was just a different term that was given to it. So it didn't make any, there wasn't any massive rise in successful charges. If anything, there's no difference, right? So the police have to administer this on behalf of the government. Now, the police didn't write the laws. They didn't write the bill. They didn't vote in the bill. They've just been told to deal with it. The courts didn't vote in the bill and didn't make the bill law. It was the Parliament that did that. Now, I think a lot of people are taking it as granted that the police have an appetite for this, and the courts have got an appetite for this, when we don't know if that's true or not true. So it could potentially be, if the police buy into it and the courts buy into it, one of the most oppressive laws outside North Korea.
What do you make of these? What do you make of these centres that you can go in? There's one, the most famous one is a sex shop in Glasgow where you can go in and make these. Yeah. There was an abandoned building on the list of this list of places you can go in to make these complaints. Have we now become a laughing stock?
Well, let me give my opinion on that. If you were, I think one of the most horrific crimes, anybody bar murder, obviously, anybody can have upon them as a victim would probably be rape, regardless if that is a woman raped by a man or a child raped by an adult. They're disgusting crimes, right? And if you are subject to any of those as a victim, you have to go into a police station and make a complaint. Now, there are things there to try and make that as pleasant as possible for you. Or that's maybe a wrong word to use, but it's, to try and help it make it as comfortable as possible is maybe a better thing to do. But that's for some of the most horrific crimes available. Saying a nasty word about something, the Scottish Government are trying to make that even easier to compile a complaint than the horrific crimes like rape and sexual abuse against young children. I can't square that, right? That to me shows that they want this to be almost a carpet bombing, that they want to make as much noise about this as possible. And I think that's quite a scary consideration. But again, it's no doubt that Humza Yousaf can't arrest anybody. The police have to do that. Humza Yousaf cannot charge anybody and take that to a court. That's the prosecution services that do that. And those two bodies may not be as keen as the Scottish Government, Humza Yousaf and the SNP. But if the police jump on board with it, the prosecution jump on board with it, then and only then will we have laws equal in only places like North Korea.
Yeah, I've got such a huge issue with this because I just think it shuts down any kind of, well, it's an attempt and there's a possibility to shut down media. It has an attempt to shut down people's criticism of the government and things like that. If you're not, you mentioned earlier how we've done this for a while. I've been on Twitter. I'm new to this, this kind of thing, but I've been on Twitter a while. I know how it is. I've done spaces where I've interviewed politicians and that. So, and we have a little bit of a knowledge on this. But if you don't do this, but you just go on Twitter now and again and that, surely people are going to think, well, I can't get involved in that kind of a conversation, even if it's a conversation about holding them accountable, because I'm not sure if I might say something that I may be, people may take as a hate crime, and then all these, reports going about me, and then I get, I've got to be careful because I can't get a criminal record. It'll affect my business. It'll affect my family. It has a hell of a lot of, how do I put it? A lot of scope to shut people down.
Yeah, God, listen, this could go. The consequences of this could be so wide-ranging, from zero difference to a Stalin type state. But we can't guarantee where it's going to land. But my opinion is the first week's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Because every idiot out there is going to be putting 10 in an hour if they want, right? Claiming that this guy is hate speech.
And platforms like Twitter.
Yes, horrific platform like Twitter. Twitter, because 99% of the people are on there with a made-up name and not a photograph of them. They are different personas to if you met the guy in the street. Let's be honest. That's Twitter. You go to Facebook, 99% of people, it's their real name and a photograph of them. They act differently. You don't get the same level of hate. And that's just a society thing. Yeah? You could have the same person on both platforms and they will react totally different, right? But X is just horrific. I'm only there because I need to be to put out my stuff. Last time I campaigned was the years between 2012 and 15, and I hadn't been on Twitter for 10 years. That tells you what I think of Twitter, right? Anyway, you're right. And so we've got this massive scope of, it could make no difference in real terms, or it could have us as a Stalin state. And the opportunities are incredible that this SNP government are putting this on the Scottish people. They're putting this on the Scottish police, and they're putting this onto the Scottish judicial system. However, what you need to remember is they also tried to put in a Gender Recognition Act previously, and the state being your nanny. Remember the named person? Now, You put those three rules together and they all get taken to their maximum potential as laws, we would be living in North Korea. You'd probably get more joy living in North Korea, because and that to me tells you everything you need to know about the SNP, their leaders, and how they want not even an independent Scotland. We're not independence, isn't even got a referendum right now. They're not saying once we become independent, we're going to become the Stasi. They're saying even within the confines of the United Kingdom, we want to become the Stasi. And that is horrific. And if anybody actually sits back for a second and listens to that last sentence of mine alone and still goes out and votes for these people, then hell slap it into them.
Yep, totally agree with Craig. It's been an interesting conversation. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, Craig.
You and me both.
If you don't follow Craig, please do. I'm sure you do already, but if you don't, go over to his channel. It's an excellent channel he's got. I really enjoy listening to you, Craig, and your podcasts. They've been brilliant. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I did make a vow to myself. I had the channel previous to this because it was something that was just like an expensive hobby of mine, because you need to pay for studios and stuff. And I was doing interviews, guests, maybe 2 to 4 a month. So I had the platform there. But what drove me to change tact, and I'll still do the interviews, that's still a thing. I've got a couple lined up for the next couple of weeks. But the reason I started doing the 10-minute moans was Matheson in November. And it wasn't so much that Matheson managed to rack up £11,000 a bill. It wasn't even so much that Matheson tried to rip off the public purse, because that's what politicians do. And by the way, that's not unique to ones that will wear yellow SNP rosettes. That's just what politicians do. It was the amount of lies behind it. And I thought, you know what? I can't be dealing with this. So I had my laptop out as I have just now. I didn't own a camera, and I put my iPhone in front of my laptop screen and I made a 10-minute moan about Matheson. And it caught the attention. And I made a vow to myself then, not to anybody else, but to myself, that until they're out of power in Scotland, I'll do at least one video a day about them.
Yeah.
And I don't need to look far for material. And I make no apology for saying I hate the SNP. I will never apologise for that. I believe I'm justified in coming to that conclusion and that emotion.
Yeah.
And people go, well, your programmes are always one-sided. Yeah, that's right. Because it's the only reason I'm doing it.
It's your personal opinion.
Yeah, people come on, well, what about Westminster? I mean, what about Michelle Mone? Like, what about Michelle Mone? Well, Westminster politicians, Rob, I agree with you. Probably politicians in Belgium and Norway and Timbuktu rip off the public purse. But I don't like SNP.
Yeah.
So I will do videos about them if that's all right with you. If you want to moan about them, go and start a channel.
My standard answer to when people say to me on Twitter, and I get it a lot, is, what about Westminster? You never tweet about Westminster. You never tweet about what's happening in England, or you never tweet. And I just answer them by saying, I don't live in England. I live in Scotland. And while we have a parliament in Scotland with a government who are 80% of what they do, affects me. Only about 10% of what Westminster does affects me. So while they're running Scotland, I will hold them accountable. If I move to England, I'll start to hold, the way I hold Westminster accountable is by my vote. If I vote Conservative, if I don't think the Conservatives have done what they promised to do, I'll vote Labour, or I'll vote another party. That's how I hold them accountable. I tweet about and talk about Scotland because I live in Scotland, and what the SNP have done to Scotland over the last 17 years has affected me, hugely affected me, affected my life, it's affected my family, it affects everybody, what they've done to Scotland. So that's why I constantly talk and hold them accountable more than I do talk about.
I've got a new tack that I take now with them when people go, I'm trying to think. I was talking about food banks last night, I think it was. Somebody's come up with a stat. It was a complete lie. There's 5,000 food banks in England, and there's only 120 in Scotland. So we must be better. And a quick Google search, and I says, no, mate. No. There's 2,000 in the whole of the United Kingdom. 2,200. And there's 200 in Scotland. So that means there's 2,000 between England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Now, I'm guessing there's some in Northern Ireland and there's some in Wales. So there's less than 2,000 in England. I mean, you work out a proportion of per capita, we're worse off, right? However, I hasten to add, I find it bizarre that somebody who has a hatred of Westminster, right, and tells us how bad they are, constantly have to use Westminster as a barometer. Because you're saying Westminster's the worst thing in the world. But as long as the SNP aren't any worse, then that's all right. Now, surely, if Westminster was the worst government in the history of governments, you should be nowhere near them. But that seems to be the barometer. You know, their bar of acceptability is Westminster, but they've spent 20 years telling us Westminster's shite, right? So, you know, if it's just something that I just think is a total, it's cult behaviour. We can see that as well.
But thankfully, I think people are starting to, some, not all, because you're never going to get all. You're going to get that section that will always want independence, that will always support the SNP, no matter what. But that's getting smaller and smaller. The donors have dried up. There's no money going into the SNP now whatsoever. The donors have dried up. The activists on the ground are dried up. We've seen that with Rutherglen. They were having to pay people to deliver leaflets. Actually paid them. That's how, you know, they weren't getting the people there that they normally do. So I think, and I've said it a long time, Craig, I think the general election, they're going to lose between 30 and 35 seats. I predicted that quite a while ago.
Well, they had the news at 49.
Yeah, is it 49 or 50? I can't remember. It's something like round about 49. I think they'll lose about 30 to 35 seats. The polls are suggesting round about 29 to 30 odd. There's a lot of areas that are pretty close. You know, a couple of percentage either way, and they're going to lose seats. I think we're on the right track. It's the Holyrood elections that we need to get concentrated, because I think that would be harder to get them out of that. But I think,
well, it's because of the way the votes are up here as well. These second votes and all that shite that you need to deal with. It's not first past the post, so it is always a wee bit more difficult. And I think the voting for the Scottish Parliament was based on the ideology that we should always have a coalition. I think that's why it was done in the way it was. It's quite difficult to get a clear majority in the Scottish Parliament. But as soon as the date for the general election is announced, I'm going into overdrive.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Spent a bit of time looking at their accounts for the last 2 years, and they're a shambles. They have got big holes in it. They've got deficits. And they live on, they've got two ways to take money off their MPs and MSPs. They've got a Westminster levy, which they take off the ones down in Westminster, which is about, I think, 15% of
their wage, their money they get.
The wage, which equates to probably about £300,000 to £400,000 per annum. The same applies to to Holyrood, but they take that as a donation. So I'm sure it's shown somewhere else in their accounts. I'm trying to get clarity on that. But they've got this levy money, which is 300 to 400 grand, and I'm sure they've got about the same coming out their MSP as in way of a donation. Now, if we, the Scottish electorate, can make a dent in Westminster, first of all, we could potentially rob them of £200,000 per annum. This is a body that's already running at a deficit. This is a body that said on the last accounts they always expect to run in a deficit when it's a election year, right? We've already seen them claim to try and get this camper van back, right? This is a body that I believe is insolvent. Right. If the Scottish people can make a big enough dent at Westminster, then that levy money could halve in a year where they've got a lot of money going out in an election. Okay? So that would mean 2024 election year, big deficit, cut more out of them by cutting their levy from their MPs. And then the following year, a year down the line, we could potentially have 2 elections in 2 calendar years. If we can repeat that in the Scottish election, I think between now and then, and the day after the Scottish election, there is no SNP.
No.
Now, people go, are you mad? Well, I am mad. Of course I'm mad. If I wasn't mad, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I'm slightly unstable, right? So, but when I talk common sense and logic, please listen. Now, all it would take is unionists doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And there's hundreds of thousands and millions of us in Scotland, right? And I would never for 1 minute tell any unionist or any person what to do. All I'll tell them is what I'm going to do and why. And I will be tactically voting. I do not care what colour rosette I need to vote. I will be voting in my constituency for the person that's got the best chance of removing the SNP. Now, if every unionist done that, you would decimate their seats.
See, I think that happened with Rutherglen. There was a lot of tactical voting in Rutherglen, and I think that is, personally, I think that is the way forward for people.
It's the only way forward, but I can't dictate to you where you vote. You're a unionist. You've got the same voting right as me, and you decide. So I can only tell you what I'm going to do and why. And it's that simple. That if the stats will probably slip, right? But the last time we had any big barometer on how the country was split with unionists and non-unionists was a referendum 10 years ago. And that was a 55-45 split. But here's the kicker. Even people that still want independence are refusing to vote for SNP.
Yeah.
So the power of the unionists and those who despise the SNP, they've got the power there to actually obliterate them come the Westminster election. However, unionists are stubborn. So that's why it's not happened in the past. Because there has been attempts to do tactically voting before. And you get unionists who want to put a blue rosette on or a red rosette and say, I am a Tory, I will never vote anything but Tory. I am a Labour, I will never vote anything other than Labour. Well, that's great. I tell you what to do. See if what I'm suggesting doesn't work. And you look at the result the following day in the newspaper, and it's an SNP candidate that owns your constituency, and you add up the second and third places together, and they're more than the SNP guy that's away down to Westminster. Don't you dare moan about it, because you don't decide
I say this often because I'm a big believer in tactical voting. I think in Scotland, because we've had 17 years of the SNP, and it's obviously not working by we're splitting the vote, and it's not, and that's why we've got 17 years of SNP. If you want that to carry on to 25, 30 years of SNP, then just carry on voting for the party you voted for all your life. If you want it, just even if you say, well, this one election, just this one, the next Holyrood election, just for one election, I'm going to suck it up and vote for a party I don't normally vote for to get rid of the SNP, just for one election.
Well, two. One Westminster and one Scottish. I genuinely...
I'm meaning the Holyrood one. I think the Westminster one, they're done. I think they're done. I think what they're going to do, and I said this a while ago, and it's I think it's coming to fruition, is what I think is going to happen is the SNPs, they know the numbers, they see the polls, they have internal polls, and they know they're going to lose, and they're going to lose big. And from now to the general election, all you're going to start hearing is from the SNP is, We're pulling out of Westminster. We don't. That's not where the seat of power is. Holyrood is where the seat of power is in Scotland, and that's where we're going to concentrate and have our MPs. We're not bothered about Westminster anymore. That government doesn't work for us. We're pulling out. They're only saying that because they're going to get hammered, and it's a saving face, and it's a Humza trying to save his job. That's what I see from now to the general election.
Yeah.
And you are starting to see SNPs, MPs coming out saying this, saying, well, I might not even take my seat if I won. If I won.
That's what I was just about to say, though. But the other thing, the other barometer you've got is the amount of SNP MPs that are said, I'm not standing for election the next one.
Yeah, yeah. Because they've seen, you've seen it with Conservative ones now. There's been 2 or 3 high-profile Conservative MPs come out and said, I'm not going to run at the next general election.
Yeah.
They know. They're seeing the polls, they're seeing the internal polls, and they're thinking, they know, I'm not going to keep my seat. So to save face, I'm not going to run.
Well, my cry to unionists, as soon as this election's announced, I go into a different mode, right up to the election happens, right? And my war cry to unionists will be, if you want me to describe insanity to you, it's doing the same today as you done yesterday and expecting a different result. It's impossible. So if you've spent your whole life voting Tory, as you've sort of suggested, I respect that. But I don't know the makeup of your constituency. It might be Tory's the best route. I don't know. But I know through talking to you, you've already declared that if it was the Man in the Moon Party had the best chance of getting rid of SNP, you'll vote the Man in the Moon Party, right? But anybody that doesn't, then you cannot complain the following day if you've got the same result as you've had for the last 17 years.
Yeah.
This is bigger than the Tory party. This is bigger than the Labour Party. This is about saving our country from a cult that want us to have the state as their guardian. Choose your gender without any medical advice, and after 3 months of putting a skirt on, you can be legally a woman. And now the Thought Police Bill, they try to put those 3 things into Scottish law. That's who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
They are worse than the Stasi. They're worse than North Korea. And if that isn't the biggest driver for you or anybody when the Westminster election comes up, then you're as well no voting. Because if you can't get, if your head can't get that in the now, that we must remove these people from power, nothing will convince you. No.
Anyway, I think that's going to end the interview, Craig. I've really enjoyed it. It's been excellent listening to you, and I hope we can chat again sometime.
Look forward to it. I can come and spout my stuff as soon as the election campaign's
exactly.
We'll launch it through Ziggy.
Cheers,
Thank you very much for the invite. It's appreciated, and hopefully we can reach some audience that have never heard my dulcet tones and might tune in future. So I do appreciate the opportunity.
Cheers, mate. Thanks a lot. After this short break, I'll be coming back with a Ziggy's rant, and then we'll end the show. So just 2 seconds. Just end the show with a Ziggy's rant. Now, I've noticed a few more on Twitter, a lot of anti-Semitism coming out of Scotland. We saw a video of a lady, calling her a lady, from Glasgow, who was telling an old lad, because he was Jewish, that he doesn't belong in Glasgow. It was her city. It was not his, and he needed to get out. That's a video. I've seen today an Edinburgh councillor put up a meme on her Twitter account saying, this is a Zionist free zone, and tweeting about it. This is getting serious, the anti-Semitism in Scotland now, and not just Scotland, I'm across the UK and across Europe, is getting to a stage now where Jewish people afraid to go out onto the streets. I never thought in my lifetime we would go so far back to the 1930s where Jewish people were actually afraid to go out onto the high street at weekends on their own because of fear of attack on the streets. And it's not just, there's always been a bit of anti-Semitism within society, within UK. It's always been there, but it's always been hidden. It's always been on the quiet. It is now, they are so emboldened now by politicians in Scotland, like Humza and others. They're so emboldened by them, they're actually coming out now and just saying it. They're just doing it. Something needs to happen. I think we need a leader, and we need Humza or a leader to come out and then start saying, no, we are going to crack down on anti-Semitism in this country. And it needs crackdown because we are heading for some pretty serious times for Jewish people. They don't feel safe. I've got friends who are Jewish. They do not feel safe in this country. They do not feel safe in this country. And that is a serious indictment on this country. And it's shameful that we've got to that position. So that needs to, we need to address this, and it needs to be addressed now. That's my rant for today, Craig. I just find it quite incredible where we've got to now as a country. We are going backwards. We are making the same mistakes that were made in the 1930s. We are making them mistakes now.
Well, it's interesting that this has come up just after we're talking about the Hate Crime Act, because in it, religions are protected, but it's the same with sectarianism, racism, and what we're seeing now with the anti-Semitism versus Islamophobia. Most of these things are viewed only in one direction. Most people think in Scotland, sectarianism, that's a problem for Protestants, right? Now, see, this Islamophobia is actually sectarianism, just a different angle, but you want to give it its own name. And that's a thing. But anti-Semitism is not a thing. Racism is a one-way street. And it's just bizarre that that's where we are as society. But as I hark back to half an hour ago when we talked about the hate bill, it depends how the police force and the prosecutors act next, because they could make this the worst thing in the world, or they could actually say, well, see that woman that stood in the street in Glasgow in the video, and that counsellor that you're telling us about with the tweet, come here, you need a wee word with you, and pull their collar, because that is hate.
Yeah.
The people who celebrate this hate bill don't see that as hate. They see that as normal. And that's a scary... But this is a thing, right? I mean, we've both got Jewish friends, and I would imagine, I know I have, and I would imagine we both have Muslim friends, right?
Yes, yeah.
But one of the most persecuted groups of people in the history of the world has been the Jew.
Yeah.
And they just seem as if, to me, they're free game.
Yeah.
Right? You can dress up all the wokeness all you want, and you've got to respect everybody. Respect every minority and every group. Yeah, there we have two fantastic examples of society thinking it's perfectly acceptable to hate the Jew. Well, if it's not acceptable to hate the Muslim, it's not acceptable to hate the Roman Catholic, it's not acceptable to hate the Protestant, then it certainly isn't acceptable to hate the Jew. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of these people, minds only work in one direction. And you say, like, quite openly and publicly that I believe Scotland gave money, £750,000 to the UNRWA. I would quite like that to have went to UNICEF. That turns you into an Islamophobe.
Yeah.
Why? I've even been called one of the worst, and I just thought your head's crazy. What is it they call it again? Genocide enabler.
Yeah, I've had that as well.
Based on what? Based on you don't want those kids in Gaza to get this aid? And I went, no, I'd have preferred they went to UNICEF, because that would have got them the fresh water. That was the whole point of the donation. And no, I can't talk about the $500,000 donation because I've not investigated that as much as the second donation. That first donation was meant to be about giving water to the Gazaan kids. But I'm an Islamophobe and a genocide enabler because I would prefer it to go to UNICEF. Right? You think, how do you square that? And that's where society is. So people they wouldn't actually view what these people are saying as either sectarian or racist. They'll just see it as acceptable. I seen it. I get held up on Saturday, funnily enough. Paisley Road West in Glasgow, trying to go from one end to the other. And there was a Happy Clapper march on, right? And I'm not sure what they were protesting for, because it was the Tories were getting it, Israel was getting it, it was Free Palestine, it was refugees are welcome here, right? So I genuinely don't know what the march was for. There was about 300 people, and I'm stuck behind it, right? Trying to go about my business. And I'm listening to this shite and that shite, and it was anti-Jewish chants. There was things that you could potentially say were supporting prescribed terror organisations. And it came to almost freed up that I could go about my day. The last of the coppers to go by, I went, excuse me, Constable, you get a minute? And he says, how can I help you, sir? I thought that was great. Police officers call me sir now. I must be bloody old. I said, see, come the 1st of April, you would need to actually arrest half of the crackpots. And they don't see it coming. And he went, I know.
Yeah.
Go and arrest them now then. You don't need to wait till the 1st of April. If it's hate, it's hate. But that's where we are. That it's like people are walking the streets in Glasgow shouting things. That video, we've now got councillors putting out on social media, but they think it's acceptable that you question a charitable donation going to one organisation and not another, and you're Islamophobic. By the same people. These people will guarantee you would call me Islamophobic for questioning this donation, because I prefer. Never once said I didn't want Gaza to get the money. I actually quite agreed with the and there's a lot of people who say they shouldn't get any money because they feel that Scotland should be looking after its own first. So I don't think that's Islamophobic either. That's actually nationalist opinion. But that mine's slightly different. I thought UNICEF are saying there's a water shortage there. There's kids dying. There's the adults in horror. Now the whole thing, both sides, is horrific, right? That sounds like but I've come out and said that I'm Islamophobic. Some people say, we need educated. But that's horrific, mate. That is just disgusting. And for a councillor, we've just seen calls, by the way, for other people to lose their job because what people suggest was Islamophobic and racist stuff. Yeah, we've seen that as recent as last week. So this councillor can he see the weekend out if he uses the same logic?
No, I think. Well, I think some complaints should be going into the Edinburgh Council anyway, because I think it's
that's a mad thing. It shouldn't need it.
It's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not good enough from the general public. It's they should be held to a higher level when you're in office, especially public office. Things like that should be instant. Should be dismissed, in my view. I think there's no red line here. There's no apology or I'll delete it or apologize. I think she should just be she should lose her job on this.
Because if somebody had said the same, an anti-Muslim version of that, you and I wouldn't be debating it. And by the way, you and I wouldn't query the person getting sacked. You'd just be like, well, yeah, that's how society should work.
Yeah.
You come out and hate that in that position, particularly in that position. And that does, that's before we'll get hate bills and stuff like that. It's just not right.
No. Well, I'm going to end it there, Craig. Thank you again. Thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this, please like it and please subscribe. And please go to Craig. If you don't follow Craig, honestly, go to Craig's account. And what's your account again, Craig?
Craig Houston Talks To. That's a YouTube channel and the X feed are both Craig Houston Talks To.
And follow him on Twitter as well. He talks a hell of a lot of sense, and he gets some great information. He's got some great contacts. He's getting a lot of information out there. So follow him on here, and please follow him on Twitter as well. So and please subscribe to my channel as well if you don't mind. So thank you. Thanks, Craig, and thanks everybody for listening. And that's us till next time. Goodbye.
Cheerio, bye now.